Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to share with you the exciting journey of Mars, the planet of passion and thrust and action, through the sign of Cancer, the rather sensitive sign of Cancer, which begins on the 25th of March at 11:46 a.m. and goes on through the sign of Cancer through to May the 20th, so around about 6 weeks. What does this mean? Is it going to be a big shift from the long transit that Mars has gone through the sign of Gemini since last August? So there's lots to share with you. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining us. I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe. This is very much a community, so any comments you make, I do interact with them. Please also like the video. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. So let's just lay out how I'm going to structure this video. First up, what did that journey briefly through the sign of Gemini represent? Because it started on August the 20th and it has had quite a time. It's been quite a draining transit at times, so let's just download that quickly to set the context. But what can we expect from Mars bustling its way through the water sign of Cancer? What are the attributes, the characteristics of Mars in Cancer? But also, what does the event chart tell us in terms of the collective, how we can all relate to it? So Mars entering the 4th house. What other interplays is it having with other planetary positions? I'm then going to share with you the Placidus event chart, which pitches Mars back into the 12th house. If you're a Cancerian person, you may be thinking, oh, not more of that, Patrick, because of course for Cancers, Mars has been in the 12th solar house since last August. And then I'm going to share with you the key aspects that Mars makes. The last of these is a very, very potent opposition with Pluto. But as this journey begins, Mars is in a quincunx with Pluto, and that's an influence that's been quite manifest over the last few months too. So lots to share with you, and then I will give you your zodiac sign forecast from Aries through to Pisces that you can watch in terms of your sun or your ascendant. If you would like to embrace the excitement and richness and depth of knowledge of deeper astrology, if you do give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can provide for you your life roadmap report, but also my special package of 30% off your 12-month personal forecast. These charts are totally unique to you. No 2 charts are the same and can give you searing insights into what you can expect in the months ahead, but also give you a much greater and more intimate understanding of the influences which have been at work in your life since you were born. If you don't know your time of birth, I've developed a new package based on your sun position, which equally can give you a lot of information and is perfect if you are used to relating to YouTube videos first and foremost. So just to give you some context, let's briefly go through what Mars in Gemini meant. It arrived there on the 20th of August. It's a great location for anyone who wants to articulate ideas, who's interested in technology, the media. A lot of journalists and certainly leader writers would have Mars in Gemini or the 3rd house. Also a lot of sports people, because Mars is about action and the 3rd house is about quick movements. But on the 6th of September, it went into its pre-retrograde shadow. And then all through October and November, it was in a square with Neptune. Neptune's a very watery influence at the best of times, but particularly in its host sign of Pisces. In the 12th house of the collective zodiac, very much about the subconscious. So information got distorted a lot through that square. Then, of course, the retrograde from the 30th of October to the 12th of January really slowed things down. And, of course, we've seen quite a lot of industrial disputes, particularly involving the transport sector. And then, once Mars went direct on the 12th of January, it was still going through its post-retrograde shadow, which it only emerged from in the middle of March. But just as it's emerging, so Mars goes back into, within 3 degrees, a square with Neptune again. So I think one of the common things that a lot of people have experienced with this has been low vitality. And I think we've all been picking up the energy almost by osmosis of the news cycle, which at times has been extremely dispiriting. So the sign of Cancer is a cardinal sign, and of course it's water, it's governed by the moon. And at its best, it's very much about nurture, home, shelter, protectiveness. But Mars in the sign of Cancer is actually in its full. So not the greatest location for Mars. Mars, of course, rules the sign of Aries, which is a fire sign and about passion and initiation. But Cancer is still a cardinal sign, still very much about leadership. But people who have this in their nativities can be quite moody, perhaps a little bit emotional, may at times, if they repress their emotions or their anger, suffer from digestive problems, and can be quite forceful around home or emotional or family matters, and really quite defensive. But a lot of tradespeople who repair things around the home or work in the immediate community may well have Mars in Cancer and turn it very much to a positive thing. But if there has been a history of tensions around family matters, it can be when someone has Mars in Cancer or in the 4th house. Now, in terms of the event chart, which is looking at this event in terms of the overall zodiac, Mars is in that quincunx with Pluto, and that's a really important aspect because, of course, they're both the rulers of Scorpio. And in the 4th house, Mars could be a bit defensive, as I say. Pluto in the 11th house just recently arrived in the sign of Aquarius on the 23rd. Well, that's the 11th house. That's very much the collective. So we've got a battle between logic and detachment and being rather reactive. And I think that could get played out on the world stage in quite a big way. The Sun in Aries is also in a square with Mars. So right through this 6-week period, I think the potential to be rather reactive or defensive is quite strong for us all. But the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon is actually in a delightful angle with Mars, and that sextile really encourages us to try to find ways that we can use the motivation that Mars has to perhaps reorganize our homes, get tasks done that we've been putting off, make repairs, perhaps even think about moving altogether, or perhaps be more motivated to learn more about what makes us tick from an emotional viewpoint. But this is not a great time to bottle up any anger or frustration emotionally. Also, the Moon is located in the sign of Taurus, where it's exalted, and that's actually forging a really nice link to Neptune. And again, listening to our instincts in a positive way could be a great way to try to manage the more reactive energies of Mars. Now, in terms of the event chart, Mars is in the 12th house, so that's the big takeout. The ascendant of this event is actually in Cancer, but that puts Mars at the start of this journey in the 12th house. So Mars in the 12th house can be as complex as Mars in the 4th. It's very much about issues that reflect to the past that are unresolved. Sometimes we can go through painful events in our histories and think that we've dealt with them, we've worked through the issues, and then suddenly something can act as a trigger. I think that is entirely possible, particularly as Mars in the technical Placidus chart is in a quincunx with Pluto in the 7th house of relationships. So I think all of us, old relationship matters could be stirred over the next 6 weeks. But in the event chart, Placidus, the Sun is in the 10th house and Mars is in that 12th. So obviously this doesn't work the same as equal house. I think essentially the Sun being in the 10th house means that our desire for things is going to be very prominent. What really struck me, however, is that quincunx between Mars and Pluto in terms of the major aspects we're going to face is really going to go on through to the 2nd of April. But there's actually a really terrific link between Mars and Saturn, and that's going to go on from the 25th of March to the 6th of April, and it's exact as this month comes to a close on the 30th of March. Why I like this aspect is that they're now both in water signs, but Saturn can anchor the rather get-going energy of Mars, which can be a bit ungrounded. So Saturn just hauls it in and asks us to work through our emotions in a thorough way, obviously Saturn being in the sign of Pisces now, and not get swept away too much with a reaction. So staying calm even if we feel emotional. But also there is a very powerful angle between Mars and Pluto in a different way, and that becomes exact on May the 21st, the day after Mars moves into the sign of Leo. But from the 26th of April to the 17th of May, within 3 degrees, those two are aggravating one another. So Mars in the sign of Cancer, sensitive, defensive, protective, rather reactive, and Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, much more scientific, asking us to be more logical. We're all being bombarded with, all these AI solutions at the moment, but that can go against the human state. So I feel that in terms of the world stage, there could be some big tensions that do build up from the end of April through to the middle of May, which will be driven by this particular aspect. But you could find yourself in some all-out conflict with certain people, particularly those kind of characters who have a kind of might is right approach to any matter. It's on their terms or no terms. But one of the things about Mars being opposite Pluto is it certainly can provoke some sexual chemistry as well. So if somebody does come into your orbit during that time that you really are drawn to, it could be a very magnetic, very exciting, but perhaps potentially unstable connection, but it certainly won't be dull. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, Mars is your ruling planet. So the water of Cancer is not particularly receptive. We know technically that Mars is in its fall in the sign of Cancer, but it is asking you to use your drive to engage with some rather more sensitive strands. So it could be redecoration, it could be catching up on those chores, it could be around do-it-yourself projects, or it could be a desire to get the family together, play a leading role in that regard. And that can all be good stuff, but because the Sun in your sign squares up to Mars as this event begins, the worst thing you can do is to try to go too quickly, too fast over the next few weeks. And if other people are dragging their feet or seems too bogged down, you could find yourself actually being much more reactive and oversensitive than ordinarily would be the case. So I think you can make progress on those things, but it's just understanding that it might not all shift quite at the speed of light. So Taurus, as Mars made its way through the sign of Gemini, you could have been very focused on money making or building up the foundations of your life. That's quite normal for you in some ways. Perhaps you just had more desire to go for those things. But also I think it may have been more difficult to stay very disciplined around your diet. And I think if just due to this post-COVID world that we live in, and of course it's still very much out there, some of your physical activities have got pushed to one side, perhaps because some places aren't quite open or as active or interactive as they have been for you in the past, then you may have found refuge in the things that give you escapism. So whatever those things are, I feel it's possible that you have ended up potentially gaining a little bit of weight, just feeling a bit sluggish, not very sharp. And I think Mars moving into Cancer for you gives you a chance to rethink, get busier when it comes to your interactions with others. That link that's forged with Saturn from the 25th of March to the 6th of April is very good for you. This gives you the chance to really be very constructive about your ideas. You're building up something that's pointing towards your future in quite a substantive way. The problem is that Mars in your third house clashes with Pluto in your 10th. If you try too hard to get your ideas across, the third house very much about everyday ideas, you could meet resistance. Also, as Mars goes opposite Pluto, and of course it's exact the day after Mars moves into the sign of Leo, I feel that there could be some kind of big dispute that develops, to be honest, from the end of April and through the first couple of weeks of May. And just be aware that if there is something you feel passionately about, but you come into a situation where you experience someone else who feels just as passionate as you but in a different way, it could lead to a mighty battle of wills. But your desire to make progress in terms of sharing your message is likely to be very strong. The problem with Pluto is it can be about having power, and Mars can be about ego. So you've just got to make sure that you're not trying to dominate other people in order to elevate your sense of identity, when it would be better to take a more collegiate view and respect that people are perfectly entitled to see things differently to you. Also, if you're thinking about buying a new mode of transport or driving or travelling anywhere, I wouldn't rush. Go the scenic route, enjoy things. There's such a lot of intensity in that aspect. It could see you, overdoing things a little bit. And, some kind of travel plan, if you try to get there at the speed of light, it might go wrong. There may be delays. It could all be very overwhelming. And you could find that your emotions are very close to the surface and may be very difficult to conceal. So when it comes to how you interact with others, it's important to understand their rights, and they're quite entitled to see things in a completely different way to you. So Gemini, despite the fact that Mars may have given you interludes of thrust, drive and traction, I feel that when it came to your worldly interactions, at times all that intent and hard work and application may have dissipated, and you may not have quite gained the ground and the traction you really wanted. So I think Mars moving into your second solar house can actually be very good for you, insofar as it helps you to start to quantify and work towards something that is more tangible. Its link with Saturn is just absolutely fantastic. Saturn has a reputation, a fearsome reputation for restriction and limitation. And in the 10th house, it is going to test you over the next couple of years. But if you're keen to build up your resources linked to property, or to take on greater responsibility, to be more ambitious, this very solid alliance between Mars and Saturn, which is exact on the 30th of March, but begins from the 25th of March and goes on through to the 6th of April, can get this new Mars period off to a great start for you. What's not to like? Well, it's just that when it comes to spending, Mars is in that obtuse angle to Pluto. So whatever you desire, Pluto could amplify that desire. And of course, from the 26th of April through to the middle third week of May, broadly, Mars is in an opposition with Pluto. If there is someone that you're drawn to in a romantic context during that time, I feel that it's going to get very hot and potentially very steamy. It may be that someone is going to prove to be absolutely irresistible. Your drive to improve your lot is really going to be quite considerable when it comes to resources, I feel. But it could go all the way to just a great need to bond or connect or challenge yourself, especially in a romantic dimension. So Cancer, Mars arriving in your sign after that extended journey through your 12th house is going to really feel very good. I think you're going to experience an immediate uplift in personal vitality and drive. It's not, of course, without its complexities, but Mars is linked with Saturn in your fellow water sign of Pisces is really lovely. That ninth house energy has been quite challenging for you in recent times because of the energy of Neptune squaring the very psychological location of Mars. So it may have felt that you're almost in a kind of washing machine environment, sort of spinning round and round, all sorts of very deep feelings working their way around your consciousness, or trying to get up into your consciousness, but all being exacerbated and amplified by the great sensitivity of Neptune. So life may have been very, very tough since the end of August. Mars moving into your sign will bring you more into the moment. It will give you more desire to get moving. It does, however, come into that opposition towards the end of April and the first 2 or 3 weeks of May, which could see you come up against some kind of challenge, but it could be a challenge that if you get through it, could be really fantastic for you. So it may be that you need to work with someone in a collegiate way that you don't necessarily like. You may have to take on an opponent or a rival, and it will be quite an arm wrestle. It may not be a straightforward outcome. It may not be a binary outcome of you come through on top, the other person is defeated. It's not necessarily going to be like that. But some kind of tussle of wills is possible towards the end of April and the start of May. But the number one thing I think you're going to feel is much more physical vitality. And that's going to help you to get away from this sloth that's really held you back since last August. Leo, for you, Mars moving into your 12th solar house for the next 6 weeks is not necessarily particularly easy. It suggests that issues that you thought you'd parked or dealt with could come either very emotionally or very fierily into the open. So expect some turbulence around the things that you find tricky. You can be a very proud sign, so you don't like people to see you at your most vulnerable, but some of your vulnerabilities may come up during that 6-week period of time. But equally, you can tap into past experiences, talents, knowledge, or even relationships with colleagues. Maybe an influential leader that you've worked with in the past could come back into your situation, but in an adapted way that brings you into the present, or will do once the movement of Mars takes it into your sign on the 20th of May, and that can be a new beginning for you. So a lot of prep could go on over the next 6 weeks. There could be a lot of behind the scenes conversations, or perhaps you can really explore your deeper motivations. Some secrets can be revealed. Which brings us to Virgo. So Mars moving into Cancer is your sector of sociability, friendship, but also the long-term future. A great location for Mars, because Mars in the 11th house doesn't necessarily want everything on its own terms. It's prepared to work with others, whilst at the same time honouring that individual need that we can have. But if you can work with others, or you play a team sport, or you like hanging out with a group of people, going to watch bands, or journeying together. It's going to be great fun and very exciting. I feel you may have some choices to make, however, towards the end of Mars and the first 2 or 3 weeks of May. If there is a romantic relationship that you're involved in that does seem to choke off your ability to enjoy your own personal interests or meet with friends, you could become rather resentful about that. Then again, if you're single, there may be someone in your circle in the first 3 weeks of May who can start to increase on your consciousness. Their energy could become more and more alluring for you. Really exciting stuff. Now, Libra, for you, Mars moves into a very dominant position, the 10th house. This is a tremendous opportunity to raise your profile, be more self-confident, be more self-assertive. It's something, if handled right, could work out really well for you. It's just that you may encounter some people, perhaps in a position of authority, that you don't particularly like. Perhaps they're a little bit more traditional or expect you to toe a particular line. And what Pluto has been teaching you over the last few years is that you have to get that balance between giving and getting. But if you really want to make it all the way to the boardroom, as they say, you may have to put some of those personal needs to one side. But I feel that what you are going to do is be emanating a very dynamic aura, which can be great for your career and great for getting people to become much more conscious of what you have to offer. Just be aware, as April comes to a close and into May, balancing your home and emotional life, or your professional and social situations, may prove to be a lot more challenging than they have been for some time. So Scorpio, what makes this transition so unique to your sign is that whilst Mars in the 9th house is really adventurous, loves travel, higher education, is quite independent, it's actually in conflict with Pluto at 2 points during its journey through your sister water sign of Cancer. So at the outset, you need to be conscious that Pluto is asking you to think very much about your feelings and why you may want to escape something that you're finding difficult. Towards the end, as Mars approaches the sign and then moves into the sign of Leo, which is going to elevate your profile, perhaps balancing your work-life situation will be the challenge. But there's actually a really great link between Mars and Saturn at the start of this process. So if you do want to apply to an academic institution or expand your knowledge in some kind of way, that's a very stable link. But I think at the start of this process, you may be really quite restless and will do anything to get out from a routine that may seem rather restrictive. And the reason for that, to be honest, is because over the last 2.5 years, Saturn has made your home and emotional life probably quite challenging. So there's a big part of you that may just want to break out spontaneously, but just be aware that there could be some consequences. Doesn't mean to say it's wrong, it could be really wonderful. But perhaps the deeper reason for that is to escape something in your everyday world or your family or emotional life which isn't working so well. Now, for some people, Mars moving through the 9th house will make them very restless for sure, but Pluto being in that 4th house may give you an opportunity to explore how your emotions work. So it could be a good time to speak to a counsellor or an advisor, 9th house energy, to try to give you greater illumination around your inner workings. Sagittarius, Mars moving into the 8th house. Well, in very straightforward terms, this can be wonderful for your sex life. So over the next 6 weeks, your desires can really increase. If there is someone that you've got to know since last August and it's going pretty well, the heat between you can definitely be amplified over this next few weeks for sure. But the 8th house is also very much to do with longer term finance, and it can be around investments, business matters, business partnerships can be also to do with the funding around the property matter. So your desire to make progress around handling your resources skillfully is definitely going to be increased. Now Capricorn, of course, Mars is exalted in your sign, and therefore, because it's in your opposite sign, is in full. So, but of course also in your 7th house. When people have the 7th house position in a natal horoscope, they can be quite assertive around their boundaries, but not necessarily always very diplomatically so. So the challenge for you over the next few weeks could be that you'll have more confidence to pursue what you want in a relationship situation, or even where you just need to compete with rivals at work. But don't be so sharp and abrasive that it actually loses the goodwill that you're actually trying to achieve. So don't try too hard, but if you are wanting to bring more spark into your love life, it's certainly not going to harm you one little bit. Now, Aquarius, Mars moving into the 6th house is good for your physical vitality. And I think it's possible that there has been quite a lot of frustrations since last August. You may have actually grown a lot in terms of your self-expression and showcasing your talents. But now if you can decide on what's really essential within the scope of offerings and skills that you've got, and narrow your focus down just to work with the things that are really important to you, I think your vitality can improve. You won't spread yourself so thinly. And I think Mars's angle with Saturn could see you make some key decisions financially which are well thought through, prudent and smart. It's just as this process goes on and Mars edges into the sign of Leo at the end of the process, so May the 20th, that could be a point, if you're born early in Aquarius, where some kind of big conflict or standoff occurs. But one thing's for sure, you will let someone know absolutely what you will or will not accept. Which brings us to Pisces. Mars moving into Cancer is wonderful for you. It's the 5th house of play. It's been in the 4th house of home and emotions. There's probably been quite a lot of dramas for you since last August, and dramas that have been very draining, and you've probably gone through a lot of indecision about where to live or how to live there, or about who can be the key emotional players in your world. I think what you need over the next 6 weeks is a lot more fun. Give yourself permission to interact, to mix and mingle. There may be times with Saturn in your own sign now where you want to draw back a little bit, and of course Pluto's in your 12th house of deep psyche. So when it comes to your love life, if you do have some very rooted fears that are manifesting all the time that you've not perhaps been conscious of, they may be preventing you from really embracing a much more outgoing, fulfilling and enjoyable lifestyle, not just around romance but also around interacting with others around your interests. So if you've got inner blockages, this is a good time to look at them, but perhaps it can be through the encouragement of a friend, a partner, or someone who has your best interests at heart. And in some way or another, a lot more fun is going to come into your situation in the next 6 weeks. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. As I mentioned before, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe or like or comment. Take care and goodbye.